everyone, my name's Angela and I'm here today to talk about this incredible trial we've got of looking at autumn sown chickpea. This idea came about for me as part of the Legumes for Sustainable Agriculture Hub, doing research into heat tolerance. The whole idea of heat tolerance is trying to find plants that can grow well in hot and dry finishes like we have very commonly in the northern growing region. But one of the things that was in the back of my mind was chickpea isn't necessarily a winter crop in other parts of the world. So for example, in India, it's grown in a couple of different of their seasons. They've got 3 growing seasons in India. And originally chickpea was believed to be domesticated as actually a summer grown crop. And it's no secret to farmers that of amongst the winter legumes, chickpea is one of the more heat tolerant types anyway. So we thought, can we look at this growing season completely differently just for a little bit of a go? And let's grow chickpeas in the autumn so that they're sown in the hottest part of the year and they're doing their vegetative growth while it's hot, but they're doing their reproductive growth, which is the money maker for growers, in the milder parts of the year, which for us would be April, late March, early April, early May. So what we're standing in here is a trial that was planted at the end of January. We've actually got 2 times of sowing, so just over there is the time of sowing 2, which was sown at the end of February. We actually only wanted to plant it 2 weeks later instead of 4, but February up here was an incredibly wet month, and the chickpeas were treated like royalty and very wet for all of February, which meant we couldn't put our second time of sowing in. But the concept of it is trying to look at, if a farmer gets a summer storm in January and they get planting rains, can they put a chickpea in and then get it to finish podding by the end of, let's say, end of April, early May, and spray it out before the first frost hits? And if there's enough moisture, even have the potential to go in with a late sown winter crop straight off the back of it. There's a lot of questions to be raised about turning this growing season on its head. There's issues about disease susceptibility, different insect attack, and what sort of chemistry we have to attack back for the insects, and pre-emergent plant back periods, and all these sorts of issues that come from a farming system that's been turned on its head. And then within the crop itself, there's some questions about the harvestability and then the marketability of the grain. So I just want to point out a couple of things on this plot here. This is PBA Sema. It has started podding. If you look in amongst there, there's a couple of pods there. So this was sown the 30th of January, and it was, like I mentioned, it had a lot of rain in February. So it was delayed a little bit by that rain, and also the fact that it was soaked in the pre-emergent a bit. So that, you know, because of all the waterlogging and the soaking of that pre-emergent, it is a little bit more delayed than normal. But as you can see, it's, you know, start of April, so it's just starting to pod now, but it's looking incredibly happy and healthy. So this plot, if it had enough time, could finish off and produce heaps and heaps of pods. So you can see it's got pods in there and it's covered in flowers. But there are questions about the harvestability and the marketability of something like this. So firstly, harvestability. Normally with a winter sown chickpea, as it gets hot toward the end of the season, the plant starts to die off and it kind of crisps and stands up, as most growers know, and part of that is what allows chickpea to be harvested so easily. We can get the header in underneath the lowest pod. But when you do this in the opposite growing season, the chickpea doesn't get that heat signal to switch off. And as you can see here, it's still growing incredibly happily and still extending its branches out laterally as well as up. And this will create challenges for harvesting, because even if we spray this out, it won't necessarily have the right plant form for us to be able to get the header underneath it. And also it raises questions of, well, even if it is the right form, is the biomass going to be too big? Can we spray it out effectively enough? And I'll leave some of these questions to Drew and Mitch, our agronomists, to answer in a minute. The other thing I want to talk about is the marketability. So if you've got a plant that's still actively putting on flowers and pods when it's sprayed out, the pods that are at the end and they're sprayed out, they're going to produce immature seed. And that might create problems for the marketability into a human market, because the seed will be small and shriveled. And there might also be challenges if it's growing and it gets a frost while it's still putting on the last couple of its pods. The frost will cause damage to the seed as well. So the harvestability and marketability challenges are two of the things that we're hoping to look at in this trial. So in the next video, I want to talk about some of the new genotypes that we've bred that will hopefully fit this growing system.